Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Fronteras, A Changing America. I'm Monica Ortiz Uribe. On today's show, we're going to focus on this month's election, the outcome and what it means for the state of New Mexico. Specifically, we're going to look at the changes in the state legislature. We're also going to talk about voters' experiences on Election Day here in Las Cruces. And joining me to discuss those subjects are Heath Haussamen, the Deputy Director for New Mexico In Depth. It's a new nonprofit news organization that focuses on news across the state, and Bonnie Byrne with the League of Women Voters. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Heath, let's start with you. There was a lot at stake in this election, especially in the state legislature, particularly for the Republican Party. Their goal was to win more seats. So can you tell us how it all shook out in the end?
Well, it's a draw. The Republicans picked up 3 seats in the Senate. They lost, it's still up in the air, but 2 to 3 seats in the House. The Republicans were successful in taking out the Senate President Pro Tem Tim Jennings and the Majority Whip Mary Jane Garcia. So those are pretty big visible victories, but they actually had a better chance of winning control of the House and the Senate, and instead they lost ground there.
How far away were they from a majority in the House?
They needed to win 3 seats that weren't theirs. There were 2 Democrats and the 1 independent, or something, some other numbers that added up. But now they're further away. It looks like 7 seats, 6 seats, or 7.
So then what does that mean? I mean, so again, this means that we have a democratically majority in the House and in the Senate. It's
Yes.
a Democratic-controlled legislature and a Republican governor. Last 2 sessions, that resulted in quite a bit of gridlock.
Yeah.
You think we can expect that again next year? And if so, what are the issues that might suffer because of that?
Well, the Governor's Political Action Committee Super PAC, spent a ton of money to take out Tim Jennings and to try to take out the Senate Majority Leader, Michael Sanchez, and also to try to win a number of House races, and they were all very negative attacks. A lot of Democrats are feeling really burned right now. So is there any room for compromise or working together? I'm not sure. The House actually lost. State Representative Joseph Cervantes is moving to the Senate. Moderate Democrat who sometimes worked with Republicans, Al Park, another Democrat who worked with the governor, is leaving the legislature. Andy Nunez, the independent, lost. So I think you could see a more left-leaning and combative House than we've had in the past.
I see. So what are the issues, let's say in the last 2 sessions, that got left behind because of this gridlock?
Well, we have a lot of issues in New Mexico. The issues the governor brought up to try to pass were a bill that would repeal the law that allows undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's licenses, what she calls the bill to end social promotion, to mandate that 3rd graders who can't read at 3rd grade level will be held back. She's pushed some tax reform that hasn't passed. Democrats have pushed some tax reform that hasn't passed. There are all sorts of other issues. A bill that would limit liability for companies at the spaceport. So there's a lot to do in New Mexico. I mean, we're still a state that's at the bottom of most of the list you want to be at the top of. I don't know if they'll work together or not.
And so looking back, just how much was spent, and I wonder if we know on both sides.
We don't. I mean, I'm sure tallies will be put together. Last finance reports are still outstanding, but with the way things are today, with super PACs and nonprofits now getting into the game, it's really hard to figure out how much money was spent on races. And it's safe to say that in the legislature in particular, this was the most that was ever spent. I know that Representative Rick Little from Chaparral, told you that it used to take $15,000 or $20,000 to win a House race, and now it can take more than $100,000 easily. And those are the races that aren't even as hotly contested. So we probably spent tens of millions of dollars in New Mexico alone.
And Bonnie, do you hear any of that from the voters? I know you're out at the polling stations. I wonder if you hear any noise from the voters about their opinion of all that money that's being spent on these campaigns.
I didn't hear it at the polls. At the polls, we heard a few comments about the voter photo ID, which the League does not support and was defeated last time in the legislature. But people generally, through the community, when we've had our candidates forums and when we were distributing our voters' guides, also complained about the campaign finance, especially outside money coming into a local area. We heard a lot of comments about how people do not want our local politics influenced by outside money. However, there is no way to really stop that. So we are concerned about that. And the National League as a whole is very supportive of doing something to curb Citizens United. And one of our first pieces of action, actually our lunch with the leader in November is going to focus on that. We're collaborating with Common Cause to see what we might do. We're not really anxious to do a constitutional amendment. The women did that to get the vote, and that took us 72 years. So we don't want to get a constitutional amendment, but there must be some way that we can fix the current situation.
Okay, and Heath, I wonder if you saw. So we talked a little bit about the Republican Party's attempt to gain more seats. I wonder if the Democrats fought back just as hard or just as negatively.
They did, and I'll tell you, I live in House District 37, which is one of the most hotly contested districts. That race is still up in the air and will be until December. And I could tell you, I was getting mailers from the campaigns, from PACs. There were, I think, 2 PACs on the left who were attacking Terry Mcmillan, the governor's PAC on the right attacking Joanne Ferrari, and I was getting mailers every day. I got one from the Republican Party that essentially said Joanne Ferrari wants to let terrorists into the United States. And that's just one example. They were that negative on both sides.
Right, right. And so what'd you do with those in the end?
They end up in the garbage or the recycle bin if I thought about it.
Bonnie, was your experience the same?
Well, my experience was with the fact that voters do not change their registration when they change their address or they change their names. So we had people come to the polls and say, oh, it doesn't matter, I just want to vote for the president. However, this race really shows how important it is to be registered in the right districts. And this year, because of redistricting, some of the familiar faces that may have represented you in the past were not representing you now. For example, Andy Nunez used to be my representative, and he was in an entirely different district now, or I'm in an entirely different district. I was voting for Martinez and Zimmerman. So people need to be cognizant of that, and they aren't.
Very good. Well, then let's turn and look at the outcome of the local elections here. Heath, you brought up House District 37. Tell us about that.
Well, right now it's 2 votes separating the 2 candidates. Joanne Ferrari, the Democrat, is ahead by 2 votes. They're still going through provisional ballots. The last few provisional ballots have gone more for Mcmillan than Ferrari, but it could go either way. I mean, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like when the tally is up. It could be 5 votes one way, 5 votes another way. There's an automatic recount. In state law, if there's a 0.5 percentage point separating the 2 candidates or less, we have an automatic recount, which can't happen until December when the state canvassing board meets and orders it. So we're not going to know for a month at least who wins this race.
Right, right. And so tell me a little bit about those 2 candidates. Who are they?
Well, Terry Mcmillan's the incumbent. He's a doctor in Las Cruces. He's well liked. He gets along with people pretty well on both sides, I think. And part of that's because he's a doctor and people know him here. Joanne Ferrari, the Democrat, it's sort of the same way. I think people tend to like her. She's worked on anti-DWI efforts in Doña Ana County, and so she's worked with law enforcement and others. And so I think it was a race where a lot of people felt like both of these candidates are good. It wasn't one of those necessarily where people thought, I'm going to vote for the lesser of 2 evils, which is kind of cool. But we'll see who comes out victorious. I don't know.
Okay. And then just moving out away from the legislature and looking at Doña Ana County, I think one of the close races that was watched was the district attorney's race, right? Which we now know that Amy Orlando lost. She was appointed by the governor. Can you tell us a little bit about that race?
It was incredibly nasty. I don't actually remember. I've lived here since 1998. I don't remember that nasty of a local race before. And Susana Martinez, when she was a district attorney here, was a very polarizing figure, and even her races didn't get this nasty. So she lost. Mark D'Antonio, the Democrat, comes in. He's a former, I believe, FBI agent, special prosecutor in the Department of Justice. So he has law enforcement experience. But it's a big change. The DA's office, as Doña Ana County has moved more and more blue in recent years, that's been the one place where Democrats could not gain any ground, no matter how hard they fought.
In the DA's office. So there were some ongoing investigations that they were dealing with. Particularly, can you talk about?
Well, we have the Big Sunland Park case, which has more than a dozen, I believe, defendants that I'd been hearing for months that a lot of the defense attorneys were filing motions trying to put off dealing with those cases in case Mark D'Antonio won. They'd rather deal with him. So that case, there's a lot of questions there. It was a big case for a local district attorney to take on to begin with, and then there's going to be a transition. Will the case get lost in the transition at all? Will Mark D'Antonio have the same focus or opinion about how it should be handled as Amy Orlando? I don't know. I think the bribery case against former District Judge Mike Murphy is another question. What will happen with that case? I mean, there's a lot of things that are pending, but that's one where the investigation centered around some pretty prominent Democrats, and some of those prominent Democrats are, we're pushing for D'Antonio to win. I'm not saying that will influence him at all. I'm just saying it'll be interesting to see what happens with that case.
Okay. Bonnie, do you have any thoughts to add to any of those two races?
Well, the thing that was really interesting to me was we had 49 candidates to have candidates forums for, and when we were planning, we put the judges and the county officials together, and there was a lot of interest in the judges and the district attorney, and not so much from the audience for the county commissioners and the treasurers and that. And my observation was that we don't know very much about the judiciary or the district attorney's office. And the judiciary, at least, have a lot of restraints on how much they can do for campaigning. We couldn't ask them questions that dealt with specific issues because I guess part of their training is that if you comment on issues, the public might perceive that as a prejudice if you're trying people. So we have been brainstorming about how we could come up with some different way to approach the judiciary. That's a hard word to say.
And how to inform people, right?
Right. And I think we had a really unusual circumstance with the judges in that there were so many appointees who had to run for the first time. So we may never encounter a situation like we had this time. But our questions were really interesting, and the people had an opportunity to see who was actually running and make an informed decision, and that's what we hope to do with our candidates forums.
Okay. Let's talk then about the New Mexico's new U.S. Senator, right, Martin Heinrich. Yeah. Can you tell us about him, Heath?
He's a Democrat. He's someone who more left-leaning or progressive Democrats tend to be really passionate about. He's worked on environmental issues for a long time. He's a big proponent of what people call the green economy or energy, shifting towards alternative energy. I can't remember the specifics, but he built some kind of car in college using alternative fuels, and drove it. I think north to south across the country, or south to north. But you can't quite fit him into that box either. He's a big hunter. He hunts, he kills, and puts in his freezer most of the meat that his family eats throughout the year. When the Obama administration floated the idea of gun control after Obama took office in 2009, Heinrich was one of a couple dozen Democrats in the House who wrote his administration a letter saying, gun control's off the table, don't do it, we won't support it, and it'll look bad for you. So he's an interesting guy. He comes home in the U.S. House for the last 2 terms. He comes home on the weekends, which takes a lot of energy. He sleeps on a cot in his office. I don't know if he'll keep doing that as U.S. Senator. It's a little different, but he's pretty tireless. He has a lot of energy.
Okay, very good. Well, Bonnie, you were out on Election Day. Tell us a little bit about what the League of Women Voters does and what your role is on Election Day.
Well, we do a lot of nonpartisan voter education ahead of the election so that people can meet the candidates, can know about them. We, as I was telling Heath earlier, we had 49 candidates to present to the public, and we did this in 3 candidates forums, and we were very fortunate in that we could have these forums in the city council chambers, and we had access to television. And after they were broadcast live, they were rebroadcast throughout the month of October, and the weekend before the election they were just broadcast all day long on Saturday and Sunday, and they CLC TV picked up the Heinrich Wilson debate that was held at the county building. And we feel if you, there are some parts of the city who have direct TV, and so they don't get CLC TV, which is the government channel. But that was our major way of having the public actually see the people. And then we do a voter's guide. We distributed 16,500 copies through the bulletins distribution system, and then we had extra copies that we left at designated locations, including the public library. And at the end now, after everything is certified, in January we'll produce a small directory called Who's Who, and it contains contact information for all of the voters who in Doña Ana County to have access to their legislative or elected officials' contact information.
And where can people find those?
They can find them at the Bureau of Elections and at the Brannigan Library, the retirement centers, and other select places that we leave them, but mostly the Bureau of Elections and the library is your biggest contact. We sometimes mail them out at the requests that we get. We had over 60 phone calls to our league line between October 1st and November 1st, which is like a record for us. People were very interested in this election and very interested in getting good information. And although we're nonpartisan and don't support candidates or parties, we were able to answer a lot of questions about voting, about where they go, about the new voting convenience centers. And so it was really a very busy time for us.
Okay, well, can you tell us then what it was like on Election Day? How was the turnout? Were there any issues or glitches or problems? Who did you see out there, young, old?
Well, early voting was really a real benefit to the community. I worked at Fair Acres, and we, of course, a voting center, you don't know how many voters we had.
This is on Election Day.
This is on election.
And tell us where that is.
It's on West Picacho Avenue after you cross the Rio Grande. It's Fair Acres Elementary School, and it used to just be Precinct 19 and 21, but now it's a voting center. So we had people come from Radium Springs. If they happened to be driving down West Picacho and saw the Vote Here sign, they stopped. The new systems, the computers are great. And I have to ask that when you get your voter information card, please don't throw it away. You don't have to present it. All you have to do is say your name. But it now has a little barcode on it, and we can scan it, and it brings up your information immediately. So at 7 o'clock, we probably had 100 people in line, and by 7:30, they had all voted. And then throughout the day, people came very steadily in clumps of 5 or 10, and then we'd have a little lull, and then a new group would come in. Not having your correct voter registration, your address or the right county. We ran into a couple of people who said, well, I live in Otero, but can I vote here? And no, you can't vote in another county, but you can vote anywhere in Doñana County. So it's important that you keep up your voter registration when you change your name or you change your address, because especially with your address, you are assigned to different districts, and so you want to be voting in the right district. For example, perhaps Joanne and Dr. Mcmillan lost votes because voters voted in the district that we had their address for. And then we had some issues with people having registered to vote after October 9, which was the cutoff for registration. And they said, well, we were told we could vote. Now, I don't know who told them that. We were also really warned in training about people being intimidated at the polls, and for the first time the presiding judges were asked to go out into the parking lot and be sure that people were not being intimidated at their cars or on their way in or out of the polls. And we had no experiences like that. Okay. The only voter suppression experience I personally had was in early October. I was called and I was told that I could vote absentee, and they were sending me an absentee application, and I never received that. And that, I feel...
But you didn't request one either,
I
right?
didn't, no. But I never received one. And so you can target seniors who perhaps are housebound or have difficulty getting to the polls, and they're sitting there saying, oh, I got this call, and your application never arrives. And then you'll hear, the Bureau of Elections never sent me my application. Well, unless you request one, you won't get one from the Bureau. The League had a couple of calls about from people who were standing in line waiting to vote, and the people around them saying, do you have an ID card, or do you have a photo of yourself? I hear we can't vote without a photo. And fortunately, the people who were waiting in line said, no, that isn't true, you may vote. And then people were a little confused about where their voting convenience centers were, and luckily the Bureau of Elections published all of the addresses both in the Sun News and the Bulletin ahead of time.
Okay. Well, so nothing. So you did have these little issues, and people should be prepared. Make sure that they register on time, and make sure if they get some kind of funny phone call, where would they call to?
The Bureau of Elections.
The Bureau of Elections. Okay.
Right.
All right. So I guess between now and in the next session, what goes on with
the legislative session? Well, first we have to figure out what the dynamics look like. There's still 2 House races that are up in the air, so we don't even know the numbers for sure, and those probably won't be resolved until December. There's a transition between new legislators and old legislators. We have a ton of transition. We have a lot of members of the House and Senate who decided not to seek re-election. And then, like I said, the Democratic leadership, 2 of the 3 Democrats in the Senate leadership were taken out. So Senate Democrats have to figure out who their leaders are going to be. House Democrats, the Speaker of the House is one of the people who retired, so we know Ken Martinez is going to be the new Speaker, but there's Majority Leader and Majority Whip to decide. And then coming up with platforms. What are our issues going to be? What are we going to push? Can we work with the other chamber? Can we work with the governor? Do we even want to work with the governor? And the governor, the same thing. Who can we reach out to among these new members to try to, and she's already talking about, I saw some quotes from her in the newspaper talking about being willing to work with anyone and wanting to reach out across the aisle. In the past for her, a lot of that has meant, let's find Democrats who agree with us on the issue and get them to work with us. With the exception of the social promotion bill, where she really did give a lot of ground, and the other side did too. But on driver's licenses, nobody, the governor's not willing to give any ground. And so it'll be interesting to see how all these dynamics shape out in the next few weeks.
Yeah. So we're likely to see a repeat and see some of these issues come back up.
Yes.
But really, we won't know until after the holidays,
Yeah.
huh?
Well, the issues will come up. There'll be a lot of behind-the-scenes negotiating right now and for the next couple months, and then we'll see what happens. I don't think any of them, the governor, the legislators, anybody knows what's going to happen right now. There have been such big changes. They just don't know what the dynamics are yet.
Very good.
We also work with the legislators. The other side of the League of Women Voters, beside voter services, is we study issues. And after we educate our members, we come up with positions, and then we do advocacy. So the League is a 501c4 and a 501c3, depending on whether we're advocating or whether we're educating.
And so where can people go to find more information then on these issues that we've just discussed?
Well, you can go to our websites. The State League's website is, do you want me to give the number? www.lwvnm.org, and our site is the same, www.lwvglc.org. Our issues locally are education, affordable housing, and we're working on a new study related to voter impediment, and we're particularly looking at minority groups. And we've just started that study.
Okay.
But we have a legislative breakfast. This year it's December 1st, and we will meet our new legislators, welcome back our old ones. They will tell us what their issues are for the session.
This is December 4th?
Sorry,
1st. Where?
It's out at Good Samaritan.
Very good.
In the Creative Arts Room. And
okay. Well, I want to thank the two of you for coming out and talking with us today. Heath Haussamen, the Deputy Director of News New Mexico. I'm sorry, New Mexico In Depth, and Bonnie Byrne with the League of Women Voters. This has been Fronteras, Changing America Desk. I'm Monica Ortiz Uribe.